My name is Julia.
Alana. Julia and Alana. And my name is Olinda, and you can call me Olinda.
Okay, thanks. How did you find your way to your current job or career?
Okay. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, and I lived there for a long time. And I didn't go to high school, but eventually I graduated. And then I went to work somewhere and eventually found my way to Lincoln, Nebraska, where I went to business school. Then my friends and I decided to move to Denver. And no job or anything like that. But I grew up in the Lutheran church with a Lutheran school, and there was a church-related organization. You may have heard of it, you may not. In school, it used to be called Wheat Ridge, and now it's We Raise Foundation. And I went to work out there to work in that as a secretary. And my boss then, who came from somewhere else, he and I started our career together. And I stayed there with him 13 years, and then I moved to Chicago and worked for him here, and then I moved to another church organization, and finally to the headquarters of the ELCA, from which I retired. But it was kind of a journey, actually, for me. I did go to a parochial school out in the farm, and I always wanted to go to high school, but there were lots of us who didn't go because we were out on a farm. And I guess parents thought we never needed any more school, but I always read everything I could get my hands on. And so then finally, when the opportunity came, then I did go to business school in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I always knew I wanted to work for the church. It was always in my head I wanted to work for the church. And God saw to it that I did find my way there, from Lincoln, Nebraska to Denver to Chicago, and here I am.
Did you like growing up on a farm?
Yes, I did. I loved it a lot. I loved the open spaces. However, to me, there was a world out there I wanted to see, and I knew it wasn't going to happen any other way than if I just left to start out to work in this little town in a bakery, and from there. It always was that's why I said I read everything I could get my hands on all the time, newspapers, magazines. And the strange thing is, I never went to a library in all those years. Would you believe that? I never knew there was such a thing as a library until I actually came, I think in Denver, I probably have gone, but I loved libraries. But I did like the farm. It's very growing things, and all my friends were on the farm, and it's a wonderful place to be. I still go back to that same farm where I was born. My parents, of course, are gone, but I still have a brother who is on the farm, and there's 2 generations now there, my brother, his son, and they're all farming. And so I still go back to the farm where I grew up and love it.
You feel like your job is a calling? Why or why not? If not, what do you believe is your calling?
I always felt that my job was a calling. I always felt that the Spirit was moving me from one place to the next. It's something I wanted to do, as I think I mentioned, that I always knew I wanted to work for the church. And since God saw to it that I had that opportunity, I'm more convinced than ever now. I guess I never even really thought about it as a calling. But I do know now it was a calling for me, and that the Holy Spirit was leading.
Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood? What were you like as a child?
I liked the farm, as I said. I liked all my friends in school. I went to a Lutheran school, and we, of course, didn't have all the good things that you have now. I mean, like technology and stuff. That was all fun. But I had fun in school. We had one teacher in this, and at one time, there were like 70 kids in that school, in a one-room school. 70 kids in that one-room school. And what I noticed was really different than what you do now. You're always on the move. We sat at our desks and waited until we were called up to the front to the class. But I did love school. I always did. I loved every school that I ever went to. I liked especially, I did not like math so much. I
Yeah.
was more spelling and reading. That's what I liked. And reading and art, I wasn't great at art either. But we learned a lot about agriculture because we were in a rural community. So I loved agriculture and learning about plants and all that good stuff. So, but that's what my school childhood was like, my elementary school. Of course, we didn't have technology at all. We had paper and pencil and pens, and that's it. We lived 3.5 miles from school, and many times we walked. When it got too cold, our parents took us, of course. And I really liked about my well, it wasn't just school, but it was at church. I really liked church a lot. And that's different too for me. Do you want to hear about the church experiences? That the kids all sat in grades in the front of the church, 1 to 4, 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, and heaven help you if you sat in the wrong pew. We're very territorial. But that's how we did it, you know, that's how they did it. And when I was growing up early, first, the men sat on one side of the church and the women on the other side. And that soon, you know, stopped too, of course. But I did like growing up on the farm. I loved being hoeing out in the garden and doing that kind of stuff.
How many hours was each school day?
Oh, we started at 8:30, and then we quit at 4. And we had an hour for lunch, and if the weather was good, we went out and played, of course, and did all kinds of games and so on. We had 2 recess periods. I think it was from 8 to 10, 10 to 10:30, or maybe 10:15 to lunch, and then we had an afternoon recess, and then we got home at 4. We got out at 4. Those are long days, I think, longer than you had.
Yeah.
It was especially fun at, maybe like Christmas time, about the month of December. We did very little studying. It was all devoted to learning our Christmas program. And we did it on Christmas Eve, and all the kids participated in that. You just did that, you know, so. But it was from 8:30 to 4, I think.
That's probably, we have like 20-minute lunch periods and then 1 recess.
Oh.
So it's like sort of similar. They're around the same time, so. But can you tell me about like 1 or 2 people who have influenced you on your life?
I think I'm going to say the same thing that I said last year to the 6th grade. First of all, my mother, who was a very Christian person and had a hard life. She came from Germany and lost her mother at 6, and eventually she found her way to America and married my dad, and I have 2 brothers. But she was a very hardworking person. She always appreciated her home that she had, because she had no home when she was little, and loved working hard and loved her family a lot. She always took care of people in our family and others. She was a real caregiver type of person. And so I think she was really special in my life. The other person was the pastor I started working for when I moved to Denver, to Lutheran Sanatorium, that TB sanatorium that existed. He'd never had a secretary. I'd never been one. We learned together, and we were together 15 years. And I really liked how he lived his life. He was calm, and he was a very good leader with the organization, and I tried to follow his example of how to work with people. So those 2 are the ones who were important in my life.
Okay, so can you tell me about some of the most important lessons you've learned in your life?
Oh my. I don't know. I'm still learning lessons sometimes. I think I don't do so good at learning lessons. I think one of them probably is that always remember who you are and whose you are. I am me, but I am a Christian, and eventually will find my way to heaven because of who died and rose for me. I think that's an important lesson that I always try to. And I try to be peaceful. I'm always praying for peace, especially in this time. I see kids are learning about politics up here. I just pray for peace all the time. I have a hard time with what's going on. So I pray for peace. It's very important. Prayer is very, and I guess I'm trying to say prayer is very important. An active prayer life is important. And worship at Grace. Grace Church means a lot to me, and to come here and worship and be with the people is very important. And I love the library, and if you're ever here on a Sunday, maybe you've been in there or not, but I can't imagine any kids in school here not having been in there. But that's great. We love to see you in there, and that's what I do to volunteer now that I'm retired. I work in the library here and provide cookies.
Yeah, that's mostly what we like to come down for.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. I have one more question. How did you find your way to like faith and God? Like, were you just like, how did you?
Well, I guess I was born a Christian, Lutheran Christian. I was baptized when I was 6 days old, and I went through the Lutheran school system and was confirmed. And church was always a part of my life. It was never occur to me to not have gone to church. And it was a continuing road. I moved a lot. Well, I moved only from Denver to Chicago, actually. But the first thing I did was to find a church. It was always very important to me. And attended every Sunday and sang in the choir and just was around church all the time in faith and listening to sermons. And all I can say is that faith has always been a part of my life, a very important part. And I would wish that for you too. However, we do it differently probably, but do make faith and prayer an active part of your life. It pays.
I have another question too.
Okay.
Have you ever traveled like out of the country?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'll tell you about my around the world trip. Back in 1967, before you probably can't even think that far back, I was working for Wheat Ridge Foundation, and they decided to have a conference in India so people from around the world could come, pastors and teachers and educators, and they chose that as a spot. And it was all about the church, mission in the church. That was the title of it. It was a year-long study, but then I got to go to work in the office there. So I started out on a cold February day and flew to Japan. And the interesting thing was I knew people in all of these places through my connections at church, so I was never alone. But I started out in Japan and spent a night in a Japanese ryokan and ate cold fish and cold rice and met some of the missionaries there. Then we flew to Hong Kong, where I met up with the person who was my boss and his wife and several other travelers. We were there 2 days and visited in Hong Kong and our church things there. And then we flew to India from there and settled and started on the East Coast. Yeah, East Coast of India. Got in cars with the missionaries and drove all the way down across India to where the church is working. We're down there. And from there then, eventually, when we were done there in that conference, I flew with several other people to Egypt, and we went to the pyramids. By this time, the conference was over, so this was just great. And then I flew to Athens, where I was with somebody else, and we went to see all the places where Paul preached and all that kind of thing. And then I flew to Rome and visited, over there. I didn't see the Pope, but I was over at, what do they call that? Chapel, Sistine Chapel. And I visited that, and then I went to Germany to visit my family. My mother was from there, and I had cousins over there and all that kind of thing. It took me 6 weeks to do this. That's my travel around the world.